welcome everybody to the next episode of Chiefs Focus First and 10 Live here with JP and Quentin. What's up, bro?
Hey, man, we got really the two things we're going to talk about today, both Orlando Brown and Frank Clark, are really unexpected today. So we're just going to break that down. Try and make this a shorter episode for you guys. But yeah, big news day for Kansas City, which is not what I was expecting.
You know, it's crazy. I understand after talking to a couple people what their reasoning behind the Orlando Brown situation. I mean, I get that. The Frank Clark thing, I heard a couple of weird things about it. One of them I really don't want to get into right now because I hope it doesn't happen, but I will say there's another AFC team that is pining for him. If that's a thing, I will say that. But I have a feeling we're going to see a cut and a re-sign, and I think they're going to work something out with Orlando Brown.
You think they're going to work something out with Brown?
I do, and the reason I say that's because, well, one thing I've kind of heard, but I know Mahomes doesn't want. They're very close, and I know he doesn't want just anybody protecting him, and he does have a lot of faith in Brown. So I think it's going to come down to them trying to figure out a way of working it out. And plus, I mean, just on a side note, for this entire stretch of Mahomes' career, the reason he structured his contract the way he did was to be able to bring people in. And so far, we haven't really used it as much as we should. We haven't utilized that career or that structure of that contract. I think it's going to come down to them. They're going to have to start utilizing it. And I think Mahomes wants him here. So that's what I think is going to happen. With Frank Clark, at one point I did hear it was kind of a package deal, but for Clark, when it came to Chris Jones and Clark, Chris Jones wanted Clark back. I would almost say it's a little bit of a ruse just to cut him and then bring him back. You know, that way it, saves cap money and you still get your player back. I know he doesn't want to leave Andy. So we'll just have to see how it plays out. I don't know if I'm hearing this about this other team and it's making me a little bit nervous, but I heard they want him pretty bad. So
Well, okay, so for Brown, to me, like the fact that they're not laying the tag on him, to me, kind of makes sense, right? If you know that the problem with laying the tag on him is going to be in the lower 20 million, I think like 22 million, because he's on the second tag, which means you had to add 20% on it, what a normal tackle would be. So you don't want to add that tag on him because it limits your mobility in terms of what you can do before you can get that long-term deal done. And because when you franchise tag somebody, that money is off the books for the coming season, because you just have to treat your salary cap like you signed into a $22 million guaranteed contract, because it's essentially what it is if you can't get a long-term contract done before the deadline. So
yeah,
I understand the not franchise tagging Orlando Brown and just trying to get a long-term deal done. Now, technically, the Chiefs still could keep him, right? They have until next week to get a long-term deal done, because free agency starts at the beginning of the new league year, which I believe is the 15th. So you have about a week to figure all this stuff out before moves can be made by other teams. But if I'm Orlando Brown and I've been told that I'm not going to get franchise tagged, and you have an opportunity to go to free agency, and you truly want to maximize your value in terms of what you're going to get financially, your conversation with Kansas City should be done. You should no longer be having open conversations about signing long-term here, because the thing with free agency is that you always are going to overpay for players because you're paying that premium, and the left tackle market is not good in terms of free agents that are out there.
no,
So
it's not.
you're going to get teams fighting for you, which only means that you're going to get paid that much more. And there are a ton of teams out there that have bad offensive lines and a ton of cap space. So Orlando Brown's going to get a huge contract, and I wouldn't be surprised if that contract comes into play 24 hours after the official free agency market opens.
I would tend to agree. He turned down a contract last year the Chiefs offered him, which was basically it was 139 million for 6 years. What's up, Scott? Um, and I would almost, I guess, without being rude, I would almost say that that contract probably looks pretty good to him right now. Um, are there teams out there that would want him? Yeah. Are there teams out there that can afford him? A few. But do you really want to go to a team that's not going to get you a Super Bowl? That's not going to get you in, another. I mean, like I've always said, you can lose that couple $1,000,000 a year in a contract that a fictional contract, or you can make it up in playoff and Super Bowl money and endorsement money. So I would almost suggest, going that route. What's up, Thiz? But he's his own man. I still think that they work something out with him. Mahomes wants him here. He wants to be here. I feel like Frank will probably somehow get things worked out. I think it's going to be a cut and a re-sign. That's what I feel like.
Here's what I don't understand, and maybe you can try and add some light to the situation, but I don't understand why the Chiefs haven't enacted the tag and trade method, because if you really aren't going to sign him, and you know that there are tons of teams out there that need left tackles, and the best you can get if he hits free agency is a third-round compensatory pick with him signing with another team. So do you really not think that you can get a second-round pick or, a bunch of other picks, even if it's not as good as a third-round pick, but a combination of, other picks that equals a higher round pick? Do you not think that he should be worth that in the trade? And like I said, there are a bunch of teams that have cap space and need a long-term deal done who would be able to sign him to a long-term deal. So I don't understand why the Chiefs don't tag him and trade him, because I feel like there would be a trade market out there for you. So just what are your thoughts on that?
I agree, and that goes back to saying that to what we were just talking about. If they really wanted to release him, that probably would be a situation they would or a scenario they would run with. Now you can only use one tag, so it's not like you can tag 2-3 players. So if there's another player that they want to tag, and they waste it on Orlando Brown, then you can't tag that other player. Now,
I don't think that. Is there another player that you would think that they would tag? Because there's no other player on this roster that's worth getting franchise tagged.
Not really, but you never know what Veach has got up his sleeve. I'm just saying it's always an option that you can, if he's got somebody he wants to bring in, or say somebody on this team that he wants to work a deal out with and wants to tag them, he might do that. That's why I'm saying, in the situation we're in, with who's on our team right now, wide receiver wise, the only player that I would say maybe warrants a tag would be Juju, but I don't think that's going to happen. That's what makes me think also that they're going to get something worked out with him, because why would you not bring in or keep the guy that really helped you along the way? Now I do know they want to bring Wiley back, and from what I understand, he wants $5 million a year. It's not a huge amount of money. I don't know what I mean, you guys have my thoughts all year on him until the Super Bowl. So I didn't think he did that great of a job, to be honest with you.
I mean,
he allowed 13 sacks.
Last year, I believe he earned $2.5 million. So
$2 million, yeah.
So I mean, that you're talking about $3 million for your right tackle. I mean, that's a pretty good bargain, even if he's a below average guy. The fact that he has shown the ability to step up, and maybe you can continue to work with him and get him better. So it would make sense that if they don't franchise tag or re-sign Orlando Brown, I would almost guarantee Wiley coming back, because there's no way you're going into an offseason trying to get both your left and right tackle. Even if the right tackle you get is an average-ish guy, the fact that you could lock him up for a multiple year deal, I think there's value in that. So if by next week, if by a week, Monday, let's say, we haven't heard anything about Orlando Brown, Andrew Wiley's coming back on this team.
Yeah, I am a little nervous, and I think anybody else would be, to have a rookie at left tackle or left guard protecting Mahomes. I would definitely be nervous about that, especially with the way he plays the game. He's very elusive. You never know what he's going to do when he's in and out of the pocket. You just don't know what he's going to do. So you need somebody that's able to that has the experience with him, I guess I should say. And you got 2 years worth of experience with Orlando Brown in that position. So if it was me, I would try to figure out a way of bringing him back. One, you make Mahomes happy. Two, you make sure that he's protected. It's different to have a couple of guys on the inside that are rookies that turned out to be phenomenal. But when you're talking about outside guys, you really need the protection out there. And that's where my thought comes in, that you better bring him back. You better figure out a way of bringing him back, because there's nobody. Look, man, I talked to a media guy today, and I know Orlando wants his top 5 money, but I don't know if you could say he's a top 5. If you look at the numbers, money wise, and the players that are out there, he doesn't warrant Trent Williams' money.
No. Orlando Brown is probably the 8th, 9th best tackle. He is a good franchise left tackle in this league. But one of the worst things you can do is, and this is what got our previous general manager in trouble, is you give out huge contracts to above average to good players. And when you lock up those players into these long deals, then you really limit what you're able to do, and you're not able to sign other good players to keep your roster in high quality. So, I think that's something that Veach has tried to avoid, in signing guys to long-term deals that are past or coming to their prime. There's that old adage, which I believe actually comes from baseball, but it's you'd much rather get rid of a guy a year early than a year late. And I think Brett Veach has tried to follow that to a certain extent. But I think that Brown is probably the 8th best left tackle in the NFL, which there's nothing wrong with being there. He's just not totally dominant when there's a pass rush lined up on the left side. I don't have to worry about him at all. I don't have to send any extra help towards him. He's not like that. He's a good left tackle. He has his problems. He's worked on them. He got better as the year went on. But, trying to plug in somebody new to this organization, whether it's a rookie or signing a veteran, which, like we already talked about, there's not a lot of veterans out there unless there's some sort of surprise cut or the Chiefs make some sort of crazy trade. I know, if the Chiefs are able to go out and grab like a Laramie Tunsil, they're able to trade with Houston. We talk about how they have a lot of draft assets, this year. So is it possible that starts to become the plan? We know the Chiefs tried to sign the 49ers left tackle when he was a free agent 2 years ago now. So would it be out of the league for the Chiefs to go trade for Laramie Tunsil? Well, they traded for Orlando Brown. I know it was a little bit of a different situation, but, there are moves.
And by the way, when we were pen to paper with Trent Williams. I mean, we were pen to paper. And if it wasn't for San Francisco swooping in, I'm not talking about the last second and offering him that extra year on that contract, we'd have had him. And this conversation wouldn't be going on right now, because that was a long-term deal worth a lot of money. And he was an older player. Which, you know, somebody had mentioned on Twitter today, you know, this doesn't surprise me at all with the Frank Clark situation because Veach doesn't normally extend people over the age of 28, 29 years old. Well, look, that may be the case, but he's brought in players that are over that age, and they've done well for us. I can't see him not extending Clark or Chris Jones. I can't see that happening. And he's going to be 29. So
Yeah,
age
there's
is
exception to
irrelevant
the
to some
rules.
degree. So it's definitely irrelevant to some degree. You know, they're still paying you know, Aaron Donald ignorant money, and he dropped off tremendously last year. So I think there's, you know, when you're talking about wide receivers, or you're talking about, you know, players in that realm, yeah, you may not want to bring in somebody that's, you know, 30 plus. But when you're talking about a guy like Chris Jones, even Frank Clark, that are playing very well at their age, why not give him a 2 or 3 year extension? You know, Orlando Brown's 26 years old. Trent Williams is 33.
And tackles and offensive linemen are a lot like quarterbacks, where their peak isn't until they get to 27, 28.
Exactly.
That sort of time frame. Really, offensive linemen hit their peak in their second contract, which is where a lot of quarterbacks start to hit their peak, is during that second contract. Whereas wide receivers and running backs, these skill position guys, we see their peak come towards the end of their rookie deal and in the first couple of years of that extension. So more of the 24, 25 time frame. So it's different when you're comparing a moving on from a wide receiver than moving on from a tackle or quarterback.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, you saw that with Tyreek Hill. I mean, you know, even though he's still playing at a high level, he was 28 years old. So it was just one of those things where you move on. Um, and that wasn't just because of his age. There was other reasons, other factors involved in that. But I don't know. I think when it comes to Orlando Brown, I think they figure out a way of working it out. Simply because of the fact that Mahomes loves him. And at some point, Mahomes has a pretty good say in what goes on when it comes to his offensive line. Um, Wiley, I don't know. I mean, I had my doubts about him pretty much the entire season. He had me sideways so many times, the way he allowed Mahomes just to get plummeted, sacked, pressured. It was just one after another. And, you know, you hear guys on Twitter say it was because of Orlando Brown. That's the reason why Wiley didn't play as well. What's up, Philip? Um, I would almost say that's the opposite. I would say that Wiley was the reason why Orlando Brown struggled to some degree. Because, you know, when you got one guy that's struggling, everything's going to go the opposite direction. So it's just hard. We had one of the best offensive lines in football.
Yeah.
Mahomes was sacked 26 times. 26 times. Now, 13 of those sacks were on Wiley's side. 13. Orlando Brown gave up 4. So it's hard to fathom that we wouldn't bring him back, or at least try really hard to bring him back. I'll put it that way. Frank Clark's a different situation. If this is what I'm hearing is true, and it's a package deal with Jones, yeah, you do what you can to bring him back. If what I'm hearing is true about this other football team that's interested in him, and what was willing to give him a pretty decent bag, that would suck for us on both sides, because one, we'd lose him, and two, we'd lose him to a team that we definitely don't want to lose him to. I'll say this team is notorious for signing older players at extremely large contracts and then burying themselves. So, we'll just have to see how that one plays out. I feel like it's going to be a cut and sign. Because you lose, I think, about
$7 million in dead cap.
7.2 million in dead cap if you cut him and then re-sign him, versus, if they couldn't come to an agreement on an extension, which who knows if that's just smoke and mirrors, or if that's something that is true. A lot of times you hear this stuff and it's smoking mirrors. It's put out for a reason. So you cut him, you bring him back, you got your $7 million in dead cap space, which is a whole lot better than $20 million that you'd owe, or actually more than that you'd owe him. And you extend Jones. You sign Orlando Brown to a longer term deal. Bring back Snead, because that's something that look, man, right now Snead's on the back burner. They haven't gotten to him yet. Talk about everybody else, but they haven't gotten to him yet as far as what they're going to do about him. As far as contract negotiations are concerned. So, I talked to a media guy today, and he was saying the same thing. He said, it just seems like to me that they're going to try and figure out a way of working it out with Orlando, and he's close with the team, and he said that those guys are just too close. Mahomes and Orlando are just too close, and he feels like Frank wants to stay here. He loves Andy, and I agree with him. I would have a hard time seeing him leave Andy Reid to go play for another team. I would just have a hard time seeing that.
The thing about Frank Clark is that I think it's relatively easy to replace his on-field production. I think the biggest thing you lose is what he's done sort of behind the scenes and the stuff that we've seen. As the roster continues to turn over, you need some of those guys there, the Frank Clarks of the world, guys that are willing to, just ask George Karlaftis about how much Frank Clark has done for him. And
exactly.
Also, on top of that, there's a reason why we look forward to playoff Frank, right? That is real. The fact that he's able to find that extra gear in the playoffs, and he's the reason that one of the reasons the Chiefs have 2 Super Bowls, especially that first Super Bowl run, right? I mean, he went in crazy in that first Super Bowl run. So he's good in run defender. He's good at locking down his side and keeping guys from bouncing back out to the opposite side. So, he is a quality player. There is a lot that he brings to the table, but he's not worth $30 million a year, which is what his cap hit is coming into this year. There's no way, no matter what happens, something has to happen, because, there's no way that nothing happens. The Chiefs are not allowing Frank Clark to be on this roster with a $30 million cap hit. So it comes down to, what do you want to do? I thought that it would be something where you cut him, you lose $7 million. So why not just ask him, hey, we're going to pay you $7 million. So why don't we just add another $5 million on top of it? You stay with Kansas City and you make $12 million for the next season. That's probably either right about or more than what he would get on the free agency market, just because he doesn't have that same explosive production during the regular season. I think he has more value in Kansas City than he does other places because of that. Because you're playing for the playoffs here, I don't think him going to some of the other teams that, would give him that contract, I don't think he has the same value there, because some of those teams, most of those teams, are not making the playoffs. So he doesn't have that same value. I'm just confused why that one, out of the 2 that came out today, that was the one that confused me and really had me more puzzled than the Orlando Brown one.
Yeah. I agree. And, you listen to some of the people on Twitter, the same people that said he's still extremely quick off the ball and he's one of the best. Now, all of a sudden, he's slow. He's lost a step. In my opinion, he's still one of the fastest guys off the ball. At 29, he's still one of the fastest off the ball. Let's see, what's he saying? He said, I'd still bring back Orlando Brown, because if you look at the top divisional playoffs, OBJ didn't allow a sack on left tackle anymore. Well, didn't he play right tackle at that time, Philip? When he was with the Ravens?
Yeah, he played right tackle, and then their left tackle got injured, and that's when he started to play a little bit of left tackle, but he spent most of his time there. I just think that, if for some reason, and it does seem possible, if the Chiefs end up having to lose both Frank Clark and Orlando Brown Jr., this completely changes your draft, because you now need to invest heavily in your offensive line and defensive line, where last week even we we were talking about how the Chiefs could pretty much do whatever they wanted in the draft and it was the right decision. Now, if we're in a hypothetical world where both Brown and Clark end up leaving Kansas City, now you have to invest in a left tackle and you have to invest even more in the defensive line because you're going to be losing two big, guys on the both lines. And it's unfortunate that, if that's the way the direction the franchise goes.
Yeah, we've seen Veach do this in the past, and everybody flipped out. But I still feel like there's an opportunity for both to come back. I would say Orlando Brown is probably going to get re-signed, or he's going to get extended. We're going to give him a contract that he's going to be happy with. Frank, I don't know, I got this weird feeling he's going to be a cut and sign. That's what I feel like it's going to end up happening. If, this other team isn't going after him as much as I've heard that they're going after him, or they're interested in him, I should say. And that was part of the whole deal at the Combine, was that this other team was really pining for him, and making a big stink about, his contract with the Chiefs. And you got to remember who his agent is too. I mean, his agent is not liked by the Chiefs at all. He's not liked by many franchises, for that matter. But he does play the game fairly well. I mean, he's no Rosenhaus, but he's pretty good at playing the game. Frank can always step up and say, hey, you know what? I don't really care what you think. This is where I want to play. If I can get this amount of money for one more year to get my, my playoff sack record. Because after a year, he's done. He's retiring. He almost retired this year. So I think Chris Jones is the reason why he's not retiring. Talked him back to coming back in. So I don't know, man. I just got a feeling this is going to be a different situation. That everybody, I know everybody's flipping out on Twitter right now, and they're all losing their minds. But I think it's going to be. Hold on one second. My dogs are losing it.
It's okay. I can take over for a second.
Go ahead.
Here's what I just want to point out. I've seen people talk about how Tooney could move over and play left tackle because he has done that. That's something you only do in a pinch. That's not a long-term solution, right? If he could have played left tackle long-term, he would have been playing left tackle since he got drafted, right? You don't take a guy who is a quality left tackle and put him at left guard just because the tackle position is just so much more valuable than the guard. It's easier to find a guy and plug him in at the guard spot than plugging a guy in at left tackle. So that's not a viable long-term option for Kansas City. That's not even something you should go into the season expecting. If your goal or if your plan is, hey, we're going to take Tooney and put him at tackle for the entire season, I think you misfired, and I think that's a big mistake. So that shouldn't be a conversation going in. He's your he's your guard, not your tackle. You need to find a tackle. So I want to get that out of the way because I've heard those conversations. They're not very loud conversations, but I just want to make sure that people are aware that that's not a long-term solution moving forward, and that Kansas City does have to go out and find a left tackle. There is some in the draft, right? I've talked about DeJuan Jones is a guy that you may be able to get. He may slide in the draft, and he did play left tackle and right tackle in college. So I just think that on the plus side, if we move on from both Brown and Clark, this is going to open up nearly $40 million in cap space in terms of money that you were expecting to spend. So if there's a guy that you like, then there really is no excuse for you to not be able to get him, because you would have the cap space at that point. The problem is there's just not a ton of guys that are out there. There are guys that have been cut already that you might be able to go get. The guy from the Titans, I forget his name, but the problem is he's been hurt a lot.
He's got a lot of injury issues.
If they're, up in Green Bay, what is it? Bakhtiari.
Yeah,
he might end up being a cap hit cut, but he's been injured. When he is there, he is a very good tackle. So if that's a guy that you think that you can take a risk on to go and sign him, maybe. So, there are some options. And as next week rolls around and the new league year starts, there are going to be more veteran guys that are going to be cut. So there is a chance that a guy ends up getting cut and you might be able to snag him up, and he could be your left tackle for at least a stop holder for a little bit. And the Chiefs still have some guys on the roster that, like, when Prince came out, I know it was right tackle, but he kicked ass at right tackle.
Yeah,
So
he did. Yeah, he did.
maybe he's your solution at right tackle. So now you can focus all of your investment on fixing the left tackle. So the world's not burning down. Okay. It's not that. It's just crazy that all of this information just came out literally within 90 minutes. We heard nothing for the last 2 weeks. And
Well,
then
that tells you a lot, though.
and then it boom, boom, hit within 90 minutes of it. I was having a conversation about Orlando Brown, and then boom, we're talking about how the Chiefs may not be able to keep Frank Clark. So they were really keeping it under wraps.
Well, and that tells you a lot too. A lot of times when all this stuff hits at one time, there's a reason behind it. They like to they like to play the game with the NFL, with the other GMs. They like to stir the pot, and I think Veach is really good at that. Veach is one of the best at stirring the pot. I also think that there's been so many times that we've thought we lost somebody and didn't.
Chris Jones is an example of that.
Yeah.
When he signed his last extension, I mean, we were coming up pretty close to. I mean, it was in like June, and we were having this conversation like, "Oh, is this going to be it for Chris Jones?" Because we weren't hearing anything, and then all of a sudden it came out, and it was like Chris Jones signed an extension with Kansas City. So I think if there's one thing you can take away from this as a Chiefs fan is that that the fact that this information has come out this week and not later in the week or next week, I think what you can take away from this is the fact that this is Kansas City's plan A, and this is just part of the plan because it doesn't seem like a panic move, right? This wasn't last minute. This wasn't like, oh my God, we need to get this done. So this does seem to be like just part of the formula, and anybody who's a part of the In Veach We Trust, crowd, I wouldn't freak out about this. I'm really just more surprised that this information came out.
And I'm not as surprised just because I know how Veach operates, and things like this can always turn out to be exactly what we want them to be. It could be a situation that he's just crunching the numbers and putting things into perspective, not only from a team standpoint, but from, a player standpoint. If you let OBJ go out and test the market right now, okay, just say you let him go out and test the market. I don't know too many teams out there that are going to give him $23-24 million a year.
It just takes one, man. It just takes one.
But here's the thing.
The Bears have a ton of cap space.
I know, but he's smart enough to... I think if he was to get offered $18, $19, $20 million from the Chiefs right now, which from what I understand is not going to... I did hear that the contract that they want to offer him is not going to be as high as it was last year, but that could change. He's going to make that money up in other places, because we all know that, a base salary in the NFL it's a fictional number. It's not exactly what it seems to be. Yeah, it's great on paper, but it doesn't necessarily mean that's what you're getting. So when you're guaranteed a certain amount of money, whether it be playoff runs, Super Bowl runs, and I know a lot of Orlando Brown's thing was upfront guaranteed money. That was what stopped him last year from signing that contract. It wasn't the years or the total amount. It was the guaranteed amount. He wanted more of a guarantee, and the Chiefs were not ready to give him that at that point. I think they may be willing to go up a little bit on a guaranteed deal now. But again, if they're willing to let him go out there and test the market, and he comes back with a contract from a team that's $23 million a year, they're probably going to tell him to go ahead and take it, if that's what he wants to do. I have a hard time believing that's what they're gonna do, but you never know, man. Veach is a different guy. He's not the type of guy that will say, you know what, I'm gonna beg you to stay. I'm gonna beg you to be here. Now, if Mahomes wants him here, and that's just how it is, you might see that happen. But I just don't see Veach begging anybody to stay. You know, he's not done it in the past. He's not going to do it now. Again, the one thing I will say is that they have not utilized Mahomes' contract the way it was meant to be utilized when they signed it.
Yeah, they did. What, 2 years ago? They prorated some of that salary because they didn't do it this previous offseason. And I think it's because, you know, you just don't want to, because when you prorate it, you divide it up over the next remaining amount of years left on the contract, and they don't want to run into a situation like the Saints where, you know, every year you end up with, you know, 50-60 million dollars in under the cap, so, or over the cap. So it'll be interesting to see what it is.
Fizz said, why wouldn't they transition tag OBJ?
I think it's simply because they want flexibility in the cap, and if they would have, I mean, if they wanted, I feel like if they could have got a trade candidate, they would have just tagged and trade him. And I'm not sure why. Maybe the rest of the league just doesn't value him that much too. So they think that, well, we know you're not going to re-sign him because, you know, we've talked to his agent and we know that you're not going to be able to re-sign him. But for how much money he wants, we don't want to pay him and give up draft capital for him. So we'll just let him hit the free market and we'll sign him that way. So I assume it's just because they know that Kansas City's not going to be able to re-sign him. So I'm not going to trade for him.
Yeah, I mean, and it also could just be the simple fact that Kansas City, again, knows that you know, they may have a deal in place with him that nobody knows about. And you go this route, you work a deal with them, that way you don't lose $20 million in cap space for a tag, and you work it out to where you got a contract that's set up that's friendly for the first couple of years, and it's backloaded, and you move on. You know, I mean, he's not wanting a short-term deal. He doesn't want 2-3 years. He wants a 5-year deal, minimum of a 5-year deal. I'm sure the Veach would be interested in doing that for the right money. You need to keep the guys that got you there to some degree. I think Frank Clark, I think Orlando Brown is a huge reason why Mahomes was protected as well as he was. Yeah, he had his struggles at the beginning of the year, but that went away. You know, his foot placement was not the greatest, and tried that wide stance. It didn't work out really well for him. But again, he's a top 8.
That this offensive line was able to wear the no sack shirt during the parade.
Exactly. So, and that's something that you have to take into consideration, because if you don't have, there's nobody out there right now that you can say can step into this position and fulfill it the way he has, regardless of what people want to think about him or want to say about him. It's going to be hard pressed to find somebody like that unless you've already worked out some type of a trade with another team for somebody that's just phenomenal. Which I don't know who out there is phenomenal that can walk into this system and be able to protect Mahomes the way he needs to be protected. That style of quarterback. It's different if you have a Matt Ryan or even a Derek Carr or somebody like that that's just a robot that is a very straight up pocket passer that doesn't move around a lot. That's different. But when you're talking about a guy like Mahomes that is elusive, very unpredictable, you got to have somebody that's able to protect him. And Orlando Brown's learned how to do that. So, like you said, we didn't allow a sack in the Super Bowl. Did not allow a sack. We allowed 6 pressures. 6 pressures on Mahomes. That's phenomenal. That is phenomenal. So, we're just gonna have to see how this plays out. My personal opinion, and from what I've kind of heard, is that they're probably just gonna try and re-sign him. But as far as Frank is concerned, I have a weird feeling it might be a cut and sign.
Yeah, Frank Clark tweeted out an hour ago, thankful for the ups and downs per usual, with a little fingers crossed and heart emoji. So,
Yeah.
maybe that there's, it doesn't seem like there's any bad blood there, which is good. So, that I'm hopeful that they're able to keep Frank Clark. I'm doubtful that they're going to keep Brown, just because from his standpoint, he's always talked about how he wants to get as much money as he can, and hitting free agency is his best opportunity for that. So, I don't think Brown's going to be a Chief next year, but I still think that, there should be hope for Frank Clark being here next year, especially because he's not a free agent. So they have up until what, June 1st is when they have up until then they can cut him and not take that huge cap hit
Yeah.
for him. So,
Yeah.
they have a while on Frank Clark, but Orlando Brown, I feel like, is just going to be. It just sounds like it got too expensive, and they were really far off from the money. And when you're as far off as they've been, there's nothing you can do. And the Chiefs have shown again that it doesn't matter how good you are or how valuable your position is. That as long as Patrick Mahomes is on this team, we're not going to sign bad contracts with anybody. And
Yeah.
I think Brett Veach and his team need to be commended for that, because it can't be easy to sit inside those rooms and talk to a Tyreek Hill and a Orlando Brown, two valuable positions on the offensive side, and just say, we're not doing it, and then pack your bags and try and figure out a solution for that problem. So
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I don't know. We'll just have to see how it plays out. We're gonna have to see how. Um, it's really gonna boil down to, I think, guaranteed money for Orlando Brown. If they decided to go back with the same contract that they offered him last year, and then up the guaranteed money, he'd probably stay. Um, I feel like that might be, you know, I'm going to give it about a 40% chance. That's probably what's going to happen, and that's being generous. With Frank, I feel like he's coming back. I just feel like he's coming back.
yeah,
I think the talk from the combine is exactly what it was talk about this other team. Although this other team is extremely notorious for signing older players for way too much money, I feel like it was talk. I think it was his agent talking just to talk, to try to get his, maximize his contract for this next year that he's got left.
it's smokescreen season. So
It is. It is. I mean, it's it's smoke and mirrors. It's smoke screen. It's this is just that time of the year that agents are going to play the game as best they can play it. I would love to see Frank come back. I would love to. Honestly, I would love to see Orlando Brown come back. Um, Philip put up here. Let's see. These are the guys. I guess he said Robert Quinn, JPP, Brandon Graham, Khalil Mack, cut candidate. Yeah.
yeah, there's going to be a ton of guys, pass rushers, that are going to get cut as salary cap saving spots. So, if it does come down to that, and Orlando Brown, or if Frank Clark does end up getting cut, I'm not worried about the Chiefs really being able to fill that position. But in terms of the production, but it's just that locker room presence that, I mean, when you have all of these different players come out and talk about how great you've been in there, that's just like, you would hate to lose that. But, at the end of the day, it is a business, and we'll just have to see. We're just going to have to play the waiting game up until the 15th and see what happens up until then. So
Yep.
I don't have anything else to say in terms of both of those.
I don't either. I would just tell everybody not to flip out like they normally do.
Okay.
I would just say, let Veach do his thing, and wherever the ball, wherever it lies, it lies. I mean, it's just one of those things. Veach very rarely misses when he does these type of things, and he's always 5 steps ahead of everybody else. So if this is something with Orlando Brown that he feels like he needs to move on, he's going to move on. Again, he's going to have to get through Patrick on this, and I know him and Patrick are close. They've been to a lot of games together. They've done a lot of outside things together, especially after the Super Bowl. So it's one of those things that you have to look at it from both perspectives. You don't want to piss Mahomes off, and so far they've done a pretty good job in not pissing him off. He's played the role really well. So from transitioning his game to transitioning with players, wide receivers, running backs, offensive line, he's done everything he can do to continue to improve. The one good thing about it is that no matter how you look at it, he's not like every other quarterback. You can do a lot of things and he's still going to be great. Look what we did this past season.
True.
So, with that being said, we just wanted to jump on here really quick and talk about it just because we could. And it was just breaking news, and it was kind of crazy. I made a few phone calls, and I've been sick as a dog the last day or so. So, if my voice sounds bad, that's the reason why. But we wanted to talk about it and kind of give you the insight of what we've heard and what we think may happen. We will be doing another show again tomorrow night and Wednesday night. Wednesday night we are going to be on TSS Fantasy Corporation. We will send out the tweet. It's already been sent out by TSS a couple of times. That's going to be every single night at 8 p.m. Every single Wednesday, I should say, at 8 p.m. Central Time. So make sure you guys join on that. It's going to be a lot of fun. And with that being said, we will talk to you guys again tomorrow. Peace out, everybody.
Don't freak out, Cheese Kingdom. In Veach we trust.
And Veach we trust.